Stream settings.
Live streaming is on.
Oh
Woo!
my
I
God.
heard that.
All right, we should be live. That's pretty fun. Let's see if it's. I'm just gonna see what it looks like as soon as I can see that. Oh, there's the two of us. All right.
We're 50-50.
Yeah, we're 50-50. It's you and me. I look pretty good. All right, I'm gonna close that. And hello, Gerry Fialka. Good to see you.
Clinton Ignatoff, it's great to see you. Concerned Netizen meets laughtears.com. We're going to talk about McLuhan mashups.
I think it's gonna be fun, man.
Yeah, it's October 12th, 2020. In Clinton, there are 3 ways that Marshall McLuhan talked about communication. Basically, spoken word, printed word, and electric word. And I think exploring this in layperson's terms is most important for us, because we can talk the McLuhan lingo and then we lose people. So I think if you could tell me, sort of like you're doing, Reddit started 15 years ago and they have this thing called a life pro tip, an LPT. So you're giving an LPT to the there in the netizen, or in the net world, in the netosphere. What do you call it? Netosphere?
Netosphere is pretty cool. I mean, cyberspace for me is everything you do on a computer. You don't even have to be on the internet to be on the cyberspace. You can just be alone with your personal offline computer playing a video game. You're in cyberspace. So if you want to be all specific, the people in the internet, Netosphere is pretty good coinage, actually.
Netsphere in cyberspace. So how would you just suss out those 3 to start? Spoken word, printed word, and electronic word.
Oh, well, the spoken word is first. That's the first utterance or outerance. You know, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of years ago. I'm not sure. I'm no historian on that scale. But the spoken word is the smooth, flowing word, which is part of the full embodied communication people have. So, I don't know, sitting around the campfire, gesturing to things. The first communication, right? The smoothly flowing spoken word. And then the written word in the phonetic alphabet gives us letters and spelling and stutters speech into these little units. And now, especially amplified by the printing press, sort of the whole body gets cut out, and speech becomes a resuscitation of the printed word. So now the body lessens, and people sort of become robots, McLuhan says, who just, recite the written word out of their mouths, and everyone speaks in a proper equitone during the civilized world for the last 500 years in Europe, as the printing press turned everyone into a perfect Newtonian robot who lived in a very scientific way. And with electricity,
wait, let's hold on for one second.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was 2 really good things, but I wanted to give you an example of speaking in proper language, like you just said. My friend from Ohio has 3 words, and I say, well, those are Finneganese words. Those are words that you might stumble across in Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. And it goes like this: sup, mungry, jeet. So the first one is, what is up? What is up with you, my friend? The second one, mungry. Are you hungry? You just say mungry. So you just go sup, mungry, and then jeet is did you eat? Meaning let's go eat something now. So you just go sup, mungry, jeet. So that's sure. Like as proper as saying, well, it's good to see you, Clinton. And what is going on with you? And are you hungry? Why don't we eat? So we're going to eat some words. But you said something in describing the second printed matter, which was so good. You said either resuscitation of So go over that. What did you mean by that word? And did I hear it right? Resuscitation or some? It was a
I
resusc.
probably tried to say recital. I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
managed to or whether I mangled it.
Okay.
Which I
In a
think
recital.
mangling words is perfectly cromulent in this discussion.
That's it, because one lit crit said that in Finnegan's Wake, every word has a typo on purpose.
Well, that's it. You see, that's perfect. I'm so glad you brought up Finnegan's Wake because in that regard, like I said, words only have spelling, and you can only have spelling mistakes, and you only really get, puns at the multi-leveled sort in the written word. Finnegan's
Yeah.
Wake, spoken, has just one sonorous multi-leveled meaning that you can hear. But then when it's written down, you can imagine the whole book rewritten with a different meaning in the spelling of the words that would be recited aloud with the exact same pronunciation.
That was
So,
good. Just to follow up on that thought really quick, my friend just taught me that humans first encountered printed word and only read word out loud with other people. Like two things. Human beings generally read out loud to their kids books. They are doing what the proper way to read Finnegan's Wake is. You have to read it out loud with a group of people and see the text as you're reading it out loud. So we are raised that way. Your parents generally read out loud to you and they have you stare at the words. But he said that even before that, humans, before they started reading alone, that's all they did. And then somebody like St. Augustine wrote down, I can't believe I'm watching someone read to themselves. And it changed the printed word. Isn't that amazing? I never knew. And he studied some anthropology or some, historical sensibility on that. And it does sound funny that, everybody's reading out loud with a group of people. And then all of a sudden one goes off like the Monty Python film and says, we are all individuals, repeat after me. And then they all go, we are all individuals. And one guy yells, not me. And so it's like, I'm not going to read with a bunch of people. I'm going to go in my little lonely teenage room and read by myself to myself. Like John Lennon, he said, when I read Finnegan's Wake, it felt like I was talking to my friend. He had a one-on-one relationship with Joyce through the printed word. But again, I think the word you said was resuscitation, what is resuscitation? Something to do with breathing?
well, yes, to bring back to life through breathing,
To
I think.
bring back to
Which
life. So I
again
think,
is very poignant.
no, I think what you said was that printed word was a resuscitation of spoken word.
Oh, well, it ought to be backwards to that. I think speaking brings words back to life. I mean, there's this sort of conceit that we have that you often hear. It's like we have all this knowledge in the world, and you can point to a library. Like, why does nobody know what's going on when we have all this knowledge? And it's, well, did you just read all those books in the past week that in the library? Did you sit there for the last 10 years and read every book on the shelf? Because nobody has the knowledge if you didn't do that. It's sitting there dead on a book, right? Like knowledge is useless in a medium if there's no one sitting there bringing it to life in their, taking it in, its
Right.
content, and right. So that
I love that word. That word resuscitation was so good. So now, Clinton, we go along, and when did we invent electronic word? Is that telegraph, or is it before telegraph?
I think telegraph would have to do it because what you end up with is the collapse of the time interval between a message being sent and being received. So if I write you a letter, a couple hundred years ago, and then I'm writing it to you 2 weeks from now in the future, a month from now, right? I hope this letter finds you well, right? And I know you're not reading it right now, and the news is going to be old and over by the time you know what had been going on with me back when I wrote this, when it was dated. But by comparison, the byline, the date line on a newspaper during the telegraph press era tells you that this news is fresh, right? Less than 12
Yeah.
hours old, right? The collapse of time sort of turns the content into an extended space perception. You're seeing what's going on right over there now. Time has been cut out of the factor with electricity. The content of a medium becomes like a telescope, a way to sense something going on really, really far away right now. And so the human's sense of the world expands to the size of a global village. They're in an embodied sense exist in the little corner of the flat Earth where they see as far as their horizon, but through these extensions, they sit embodied on a plane encompassing the entire world right now simultaneously. Um, uh, so so yeah, that's what electricity does. Is as soon as the time horizon collapses to zero, you just get space covering the whole planet that we exist on. We get vertigo trying to consider that we know what's going on in China right now, for instance, immediately.
Clinton, that was so well put. And what it evoked in me is the collapse of time shapes human behavior. Be specific. You really explain that, but how does it shape our behavior in other words than what you just said?
Well,
Anything you can add?
easily that environment is so utterly terrifying and abysmally large that we shrink in the face of it and retreat to a rear view mirror and just try to stick to our own little zone and block out most of this sensory enlargement by living in the rear view mirror environment where everyone just sticks to their own little world and tries to ignore the vast responsibility of living in a world where the butterfly effect means any one of us can unleash chaos which consumes the planet, so to speak, in a in the way that a fantastical paranoia sort of ought to be evoked by anyone empowered by our modern sense extensions.
That was so well put. And what I like is you used a term that comes up a lot in McLuhan probing called rear view mirrorism. So what does that mean? How does rear view mirrorism shape our behavior? What does it do? I interpret it as you go forward, but you're always looking at the past. So, a big influence on Marshall was a guy named Wyndham Lewis who has this line that sounds cute. It's like Emerson says, I hate quotations, say it in your own words. But Wyndham Lewis has this line. He goes, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. Now, that sounds cute and it sounds like he's saying something, but we're living in the present right now. Me and you are living in the present, having a dialogue on YouTube Live. Then it will be taped and anyone can watch it. And we're writing a history of the future, which is ironic terminology because the future's in forward, and how can you write a history of it? So that's the tongue twister. We're living in the present and writing a detailed history of the future. So this whole thing of collapsing time and understanding that we're looking in a rear view mirror as we're moving forward. So are you saying we should be looking to the present in the forward and not referencing the past? That's what I don't get about rear view mirrorism, because it seems as though it's saying, don't remember or worry about the past, just move forward.
Well, this is where the role of the artist, as McLuhan prescribes it, comes in. So not every artist does this, but McLuhan is trying to inform artists of a duty that they have. All right. So the artist in McLuhan is someone who can look at the present and not go crazy. in the abysmal terror of its implications and their lack of any tradition to prepare or inform them of of how to be, on how to act in it, right?
Yeah.
Um, the rearview mirror occurs because people habituate to their habitat. I mean, that's habit is one word with two complementary meanings. You have your habits, and they take place in your room or your habitat or your home, and everything about your home is set up complementary to what your habits are, because you leave things where you last left them, because that's where you're going to pick them up against, right? And so, as creatures of habit who inhabit our habitats, um, once you're used to a thing, you don't want it all to change on you, because now your habits are obsolete, right? Um, and that's how you end up living in the past when the world leaves you behind, right? Companies can't stick to their standard operating procedure when some other new up and comer has something more efficient that does the job better, because they'll just get run out of business, right? Everyone needs to keep playing catch up and shattering their old comfort level and moving into the new way of doing things all the time, all the time. That's the acceleration people are caught in, and it's a form of acceleration which has sort of been which marketing um and advertisers have taken advantage of to artificially impel people to buy stuff on the promise that it keeps them up to date, right? That's a whole other side story in and of itself. But the rearview mirror, it's the artist's job not to get people to live in the past, but to retrieve the fractured fragments of the past and place them in the present in a way which helps people leap the gap, close the gap, right? People's old rear view mirrors are being shattered, but then those shards can be, with the artist's perception, sort of put back into a new mosaic or bricolage of ways where, okay, we don't have to reinvent everything from scratch. Here's what you were used to in the past, as it still fits into the present in this new way. And this is the retrieval quadrant of the tetrad. Okay, here's your world put back together again in a way you might have an easier time getting back into and perceiving what's going on again. This new thing is just like this old thing, but different, right?
That's could I interject one thing, because I think you articulated that so clear for me that it reminds me of a poetry friend saying that Gerry Snyder, the poet of nature, the beat poet who's still living, said, the task of the poet is to see the world without language and then put that seeing into language.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? So that's sort of, you're sort of saying, McLuhan's just saying, you artists, you've got to collage things and mosaic things and use some of the old and some of the new.
Right. Right. And it's often it's a matter of proportionality, right? What's happened is it's the same thing, but the proportions have changed, and a sufficient quantitative change becomes a qualitative change of subjective experience. Something that was small had one meaning. Once you blow that thing up, it now means something completely different. And that would be, right, the enhancements, or that would be once that flip occurs, so where something is pushed to the extreme of it, there's a total qualitative flip of that thing into being something completely different, right? That's the flip quadrant of McLuhan's tetrad, right? And that's when
The
things get
fourth
enhanced or
reversal.
obsolesced, right?
Yeah. You mean there's four and it's the reversal. What does
Right,
it become when extinct? Yeah. But what you said also, Clinton, evoked George Lakoff, neuroscientist, who said, in order for the Occupy movement to succeed, they need to use the old ways and the new ways. So the old ways was they were getting written up in Wall Street Journal right away. And the new ways was they were using live video streaming with telephones. We had live TV since the invention of TV, but not with a little cigarette pack device. It was in big TV studios. They were doing live TV, just like we're doing live now. So that was really well put. So you've sort of defined, unless you want to add, well, no, let's go back to electronic words. So we had spoken word, then we had printed word, then we have electronic word. So one thing about electronic word that was interesting, we both sort of agreed it probably started sort of in the whenever telegraph started, 20s or 30s, I'm not sure. And if you look up social media on Wikipedia, it will say, I always say, well, social media started with spoken word and printed word. And that's not really true because it's media, it's an invention, and it's social. They say, no, it started with the telegraph, which is electronic word. So if you look at the word social media, which is a dominant force in today's world, then we'll say, well, let's say it started with the telegraph. And some of my friends and great thinkers go, well, I don't use social media. I goes, but you live in a social media. It doesn't matter if you do Twitter or not. You live in a Twitter world. But they go, I don't rely on it. So I go, okay, well, you don't personally rely on it, but you're going to hear every day that so-and-so tweeted this, and 1 hour ago they tweeted. So you still live in that world. But
Yeah.
I'm saying is how, because you're sort of an expert in social media, in being a netizen, how does electronic word fit into this thing called social media? How do you navigate those two terms?
All right.
Like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So social media, as basically in the way it's used, it describes these couple of companies, Facebook, Twitter, that came out of the Web 2.0 bubble 15 years ago. And all that means is the internet was hard to use until Steve Jobs reached in your pocket and stole your little flip phone, and he stuck a little computer in there. And you just call it a smartphone, but it's a really, really, really easy to use internet that's just as easy as going down to the telegraph office, your Western Union telegraph office back in, the 1940s, and saying, "Hello, I'd like to send a telegram to my friend overseas." "Okay, sir, what's your telegram?" Right? And so social media is a retrieval of the ease of use customer service interface of sending a message right now to your friends through the telegraph network. Now, all the
And you said that started 2005, 15 years ago.
Yeah, social media are about 2005, 2006. I don't have the exact date.
Okay.
When
Okay,
as soon as
well,
Facebook stopped being
yeah, good. Go ahead. Sorry.
so as soon as Facebook stopped being a university only, a college and university only website and opened up to anybody can make an account, let's call that the dawn of social media. And it just means you don't need to know anything about a computer in order to use a computer to do all the things that people had been doing, been trained to do on their desktop computer. When they dial up, boop, 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 boop. All right, open my thing, send an email, join a mailing list, join a web forum, right? All that stuff is just way too complicated for the person in the street to modify a term from The Social Construction of Reality by Berger and Luckman. The average person on the street, they weren't going to get on this internet thing until social media made it so easy anyone could do it. And that's what we've been living in for 10, 15 years. That's what social media is. It's as easy again as calling the Western Union office and saying, "Hi, can you send this telegram to this person?" Blah, 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 blah. It's instant, almost. And, you can send it to as many people as you want. And reporters use it, and stockbrokers use it, and everybody uses it to connect everything. But that's just all high level ease of use interface stuff. That's the content level of it, right? That's got nothing to do with the actual medium, which is the computer itself. That's kind of my whole shtick. But social media, the electronic word, as content, as something that's people use instrumentally in their lives. Oh, I'm just sending a message. That doesn't actually change anything, right? That's sort of the ignorant somnambulist take on it all, to use more McLuhan jargon.
Yeah. And so that's you're talking form and content.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have we moved beyond electronic word, or is it really just the three that Marshall sort of said? Because we did go digital and there's this or that, but is it really just the three forms in essence in your studies?
I would say
Your
that there has been a qualitative change that we can that we can say things have changed since Marshall McLuhan was telling us what was going on in the 70s. Yes. Television was showing everyone low resolution icons of people whose faces were cool and could be anyone, your friend, Johnny Carson and I don't know, Jack Parr and and then, his observation that JFK was cooler than Nixon on TV. It took a certain sort of person to be a familiar everybody to resonate on television, and telephones were turning people discarnate. Right, we are discarnate when we get on the phone or when we broadcast ourselves. Right, we're living in an environment which this our sense of space has expanded beyond our embodied space, right? You're just sitting in a studio or you're just sitting in a phone booth, standing in a phone booth, and yet you feel like you're spread to where the other people are, and so you're living discarnately. I say we've gotten to the point where people are now with multimedia PCs and multimedia um, um, interactive experiences on a computer. People are now incarnating in cyberspace, and they're incarnating in the flesh, buying merchandise and buying all the services which let them look like movie stars every day, or let them represent who they are. And they got band merchandise on their shirts, and they're representing their favorite media in the flesh, in how they dress and how they act and where they go and how they do their hair. And they're buying all right merchandise, right? It makes me think of uh anyway, you get what I'm saying. We're
Yeah,
not discarnate anymore. We're incarnating our media, I would say.
yeah. Now here's the thing. Two things. That's like you look at the kids doing TikTok or Snapchat and they put these faces on. They don't even have to go buy them. They just put this funny emoji face on and makes their face look weird, like a mask. But
Yeah.
what would you call that if we agreed with spoken word, printed word, electric word as the first three? What would you call the fourth? Is what we're in now. Would you call it a fourth? And what would you call it? Digital age or the incarnate age or the incarnate form? I mean, is there a word that is known or thrown around in your studies or?
Oh, heck. Well, there's this field of academia, and it's not a word I like. It's not a word whose usage that I'd like to spread or that I'd like to consecrate as right. I don't like it, but it's post-humanities. The post-humanities. We're in the post-human age. And there's all sorts of books you can go like the post-human encyclopedia, right? It's all about these living as identities which break and subvert all traditional forms, all right? The oppression of all these traditional forms and these traditional categories, and becoming in a state where the human subject has been decentered from our anthropological um, um, shared common perspective, right? Basically, what they're saying is, during the Renaissance and during the Enlightenment, humanity put itself, humanity was at the center of the universe, and then Copernicus said, no, 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 we're some backwater planet. It isn't even the center of our planetary system. The sun is at the center, and humanity was broken away from being the center of the universe. And then Darwin said, oh, you're just evolved animals. God didn't give the planet to you. You just happened to evolve. And then so humanity reasserted its centrality by saying, oh, but yes, but we're the top of the evolutionary chain. Oh, yes, but we're the part of the universe that can see the rest of the universe, right? Humanity's trying to make itself being the hottest shit, the most important thing in our own story. And so that's the Anthropocene, the era where humans are the most important thing in our story, and all the story of the universe is about us first, and everything else is under our control or downstream from us or beneath us, right? And then the
Yeah.
post-human age is like, all right, no, we have to accept that we are not the center of our story, right? And us as individuals have to decenter ourselves from feeling like we're entitled to our own agency or our own self-determination, and that the rest of everything else is subject to our machinations, so to speak. I guess
Yeah.
that seems to be where the academic discussions are going in the humanities, or at least that's a branch of it. And so that's what I
Right.
think
Because,
is most relevant.
yeah. Yeah, that was well put too, because I'd say, well, there's spoken word, printed word, electronic word, and now post-human word.
Yeah, right. And
Let's just say we'll find that fourth, and you wouldn't say it's called digital word, because digital is really the same as electronic, or it's pretty close to electronic.
see, this is what I'd like to flesh out more, because we're on a digital medium, as people say. Now, since you and I
Yeah.
aren't sitting here in front of a row of dip switches flicking ones and zeros,
Yeah.
neither one of us are engaged directly with anything digital whatsoever right now. There's absolutely nothing digital about our so-called digital communication. If we were on a telegraph, it'd be more digital, because at least we're still dealing with on off, boop 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 boop, right?
Right. We're just doing telephone television, basically. What
yeah,
Kubrick
yeah,
did in 2001. That's just telephone television.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. For you and I, there's no difference between our conversation being analog right now or
Mm,
digital right now, except for a
right.
couple things that give it away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So let's
so
leave it at post-human for now. But what I'd like is to update as you go about in your studies and thinking process, if that fourth form of communication, spoken, printed, electronic, is the fourth, called post-human, or it's called something else. Now, the big question is, Clinton, is Marshall McLuhan said that we can look to the artist to uncover and survey the hidden psychic effects. So we can figure out what spoken word did to us, what printed word did to us, what electronic word did to us. We can figure it out. We can observe it. And we look to the artist and they do this. They reveal it. And that whether it's literature or film or TikTok people or whatever, they're revealing the hidden psychic effects. But Marshall said, but we still ignore them, even though we can turn to the artist to reveal them. So that what he learned from Ezra Pound was, so we can cope with what we don't like about these hidden psychic effects, how they're shaping us. What we don't like, we can flip a disservice into a service, and we can cope with the disservices. So the question is what can be done? Like, what's your strategy? What can be done?
you use the word uncover and the word
Yeah.
reveal, and
Yeah.
those are precisely directly relevant, because cyberspace only exists as a spatial extension of the sort that I was earlier ascribing to. This ability, I ascribed it to the telegraph, extends our sense of space directly. But even though I'm looking at you right now in Venice and you're looking at me in Ottawa, there's this whole, not just intervening, but interceding, which means directly playing with computing infrastructure that's completely invisible to both yourself and me. It's just as transparent. Well, it's as transparent and black boxed, to use the term from cybernetics. It's a black box, and it's sort of like the black box, since you mentioned Kubrick, as represented by the monolith, right? This
Yeah.
utterly impenetrable form, which sort of exists like a black hole, a black hole has an event horizon, which means not even
Yeah.
light can escape within this radius around this singularity. So that when we look at a black hole, eventually we hit the sphere where light can't escape it anymore. And everything that gets sucked into the black hole ends up as this flattened surface of this sphere, and we don't even know what happened to it when it gets on the other side. And it contains mind-boggling things that break our brain when we try and encapsulate it in our typical Newtonian sense of space and time, right? Right, 100 years ago, Einstein and Minkowski and all those guys destroyed space-time, and now we look to quantum physicists to try and explain what the hell's going on. But Newtonian three-dimensional space and time has been shattered for our consciousness, right? That's a huge theme in McLuhan. He got that from Siegfried Gideon. He got that from Wyndham Lewis. And so since then, cybernetics has developed this idea of black boxes. And that's just any device you don't understand. But what this device gives you instead is an interface. So because you don't understand a computer, you just interface with it at a surface level. And what an interface is I'm looking at you, Gerry, and I see your flappy meat lids on your eyes, and I see the crinkle on your mouth, and I see your forehead wrinkles, and somehow I feel like I can empathize with you, right? I'm interfacing with you. The infinite depths of your complex brain are being shunted through the motions of your face and the nodding of your head and the sounds you're making with your mouth, which is spoken word. And we're communing at a very deeper level, and that's what makes us human, is this ability to just through flapping our meat around, come together as one in this magical thing, which elevates us to all the marvels which have been wrought upon this planet since the spoken word allowed us to tame matter and create our environment around us, right? So now we interface with black boxes, and computers seem infinitely deep, and yet designers, artists afford us easy means to use them. Oh, no, you don't have to understand how your smartphone works. You just push this button and Siri will take care of everything for you, right? You stare at these little pixels and you interface with them, and oh my God, I got the whole world in my fingertips. Oh, all the information is here, right? Everyone's interfacing with the surface level of what product designers afford to us to be easy. And that's cyberspace. That's where everyone's trapped. So if there's a way out of this, it's to get back to the real world of what's going on beneath that. And that means cracking open the black boxes, because the black boxes are entirely just an easy to use, it's just a business model. Hey, if we don't know how, if the people who buy our products don't know how they work, then we can just keep messing with them and keep selling them a new one every year, and they don't even know that we're selling them the same old garbage again and again. Ha ha ha! Invest in us, guys. We're taking it to the top, right? It's just
okay. Hold on one second, because you said something really important. You said you answered my question. The way to get back, I says, what can be done? And you said is to crack open the black box. Now that's metaphorically or literally. Now, because yesterday, CBS Sunday Morning has a 5-minute segment on people who want to repair their cell phones, but they purposely put screws in so you can't open them. And now they're begging the companies through the government to let us fix our own cell phones. Were you meaning that, crack open the black box, or were you meaning something else? Explain what you meant literally and metaphorically by cracking open the black box.
You understood exactly what I meant. Literally cracking open the black box. It's the same with farmers who demand the right to repair their own farm equipment. But John Deere says you're not allowed to crack open your tractor. You got to go pay us to come and fix the, chain, right? There's a million examples of this in the practical ground earth way. And if we want to get metaphorical, I would say the only thing that should be a black box is other human beings, and your pet dog, if you like, sure, right? The actual the life of other people as individuals on a one-to-one basis, who we have to respect. We have to respect the divine with, right, whatever we hold sacred within what makes life valuable, right? As individuals, the humans you meet on the street and whatnot. That's the only black box you have to interface with indirectly through communication. But your computer should be your computer. Your car should be your car. You should be able to tear that down to the bottom and understand how it works. It shouldn't be a mysterious black box oracle that you elevate to the same level, that the same level of efficacy that we afford to life itself.
Right. Now, did you see that piece? Because if you didn't, you knew what it was. In 5 minutes, they started with a guy who was a farmer who couldn't fix his tractor because it was digital, and he lost a big crop when he grew up, and they always could fix their tractors. But now that it's digital, he couldn't fix it, and he calls, and John Deere says, "Oh, we can't help you for a week." So John Deere, because he complains, says, "Well, now we're going to make it a little more accessible." But what you said, you brought up, that was really well put. You divided them literally and metaphorically, and you said it in really good, clear terms. But there's another poet, Auden, who said that the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. So this thing about mystery can be good. We want to have mystery in the world. We don't know what Finnegan's Wake means, but we're going to pursue it. And we're never going to really know, but we could say, like it said, oh, McLuhan broke the Finnegan's Wake code. I love to say that. And people are like, nah, there's 100 people who have written books about, interpreting or analyzing Finnegan's Wake. But I like to say McLuhan broke the code, and they're like, "No, he did." But this whole thing about mystery, what are the services and disservices of the word mystery in the context you just used it?
I have no worries about when the contrived artificial mysteries are dispelled and demystified. That mystery and magic in the universe will be, extinct and over. Anybody who looks at mere mundane, boring reality of the day-to-day life and all the mystery for them is, encapsulated in, fantasy novels or science fiction novels or alternate egos in mediated narratives, right? Oh, real life is so boring. I have to escape to my imagination for mystery, right? They're living completely backwards. Actual, like we say, life is stranger than fiction. There will always be mystery. Don't worry, we're not going to run out of mystery just because we dispel the mystery of what currently enchant us. And that's because as humans we're growing, and maturation implies that as a child, life is full of mystery because you haven't come into mastery of very much of it yet, and it's all mysterious, and children are endlessly curious and exploring. But as has been, like, look at Robert Bly, for instance. Look at the chorus of people who have been saying, "Oh, we've lost rituals of initiation and maturation into adulthood," or complaining that ubiquitous neoteny. There are no adults anymore. Everyone's a child. No one's grown up yet, right? Adults have different mysteries than children do. They don't lack mystery in their lives. Mysteries will always in some form, right? Will always in some form enchant our reality. And as humans, the restoration of the capacity for the old to raise and teach the young and to have a tradition on which to impart onto them is something that I see as well. At least I'll say that I see it as a core. That's something that needs to be addressed as a core issue to overcoming all sorts of obstacles that face us coming in the future.
Yeah, that was well put, because artists try to retain and go back to their childhood innocence. So they are creating their art without the baggage of like knowing and not knowing. Because I've been contemplating this whole thing of stupidity, dumbness, and ignorance. Like Zappa says, either stupidity or ignorance is the building block of the universe. which is if you don't know something, you ask. It's like, why do we ask questions? But so many big modern philosophers will go, well, you have to unlearn, and not knowing is important. So how do you balance this whole thing of like, no, that's stupid. Oh, these stupid people. And then, well, no, how do you flip stupidity into new revelations, you know?
Right, right. Well, there's a sort of see, that's it. Experiential learning sort of means experience at what? And experiential, right? The things that we learn in a cool medium, for instance. Um, um, they are, or the soft form of play, right? There's this great literature about children using computers in the 80s. I've just been reading Sherry Turkle's The Second Self, and her and Seymour Papert. There's just this crew at MIT that are reading books that are studying children using computers in the 80s, going, what are machines going to do to us? And they're isolating two basic sorts of approaches, and that's this child learns all the logic of computer programming and builds everything very logically and procedurally step by step, right? And they use computers as a hard medium, McLuhan would say. And then this other child is constantly playing and exploring and has to confine themselves to only using a few things and sees what it does and sees what it does and is constantly making mistakes, and it's very Piagetian involved, cool sense of trying things over and over again, and they're not sticking to rigid formulas, and they don't just want to learn what to do. They want to go do and do and do and get a feel for what to do, right? And so these two approaches to media, they've often been gendered, but maybe McLuhan removes any sense of that from the discussion. It's just, open-ended involvement and stepwise applied know-how learning. And so I feel like the childishness has to oscillate with, all right, I'm exploring. All right, I've made up my mind about this. I'm coming up with a method. I'm going to stick to it, and then I'm going to break down something else. And you just have to find new, right? You have to oscillate back and forth in different domains, in different fields, at different scopes, and hope that eventually you end up in a spiral around something which fills the hole in your soul, to steal ABBA lyrics, which might be rock and roll. I don't know, but
That is good.
I'm going to swing back to closing that conversation.
Yeah. That was really well put, because I can illustrate it perfect. In my Pixel Fest is 30 years old. So it's video film festival made with toy video camera, really low tech, the lowest tech of all video cameras. Came out from 87, 89. And a kid calls me up, a film student, 30 years ago, and he says, I'm in film school and I like Pixel because I only have to hit one button, whereas all they're teaching me is how to hit buttons, this button, that button, this button, and he loved it. So he entered every year for 20 years, and by this 20th year, it was all sophisticated button hitting videos now. So he loved the no buttons, and then he grew to hitting a lot of buttons, but it varied. And he did capture the low tech, as we call low tech hijinks attitude of Pixels, that you can make art with a pencil, or you can make art with a bazillion-dollar film set in special effects and CG and everything. So it's not that one is better than the other, they're just different. Now, Clinton, you talked about a lot, and one thing that it reminded me of is Marshall's reinterpretation of Narcissus. Could you tell me basically what his Narcissus as narcosis means? Because people like they want to basically think that the Greeks said this and they laid it down, and this is a template for us to learn from the Greek myths. And that's important. But he sort of said, well, wait a minute, look at it this way, because the word Narcissus comes from narcosis, which means numbness. So what is he basically saying with his reinterpretation?
The great, okay, let's get on the same page, which is page 41.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
So the gadget lover, Narcissus as narcosis. The Greek myth of Narcissus is directly concerned with a fact of human experience. As the word narcissist indicates, is derived from the word narcosis, as you already, or numbness. The youth narcissist mistook his own reflection in the water for another person. This extension of himself by mirror numbed his perceptions until he became the servo mechanism of his own extended or repeated image. The nymph Echo tried to win his love with fragments of his own speech, but in vain. He was numb. He had adapted to his extension of himself and had become a closed system. Now, the point of this myth is that fact that once anybody at once becomes fascinated by any extension of themselves and any material other than themselves, people become fascinated as such. So the thing is, Narcissus didn't know that what he was looking at was an extension of himself. Now, people who hold a hammer see the hammer as just a tool. They can pick it up, they can put it down, but when they're holding the hammer and they can actually swing it properly, it becomes an extension of themselves, right? This is me extended, right? Heck, to pull an extreme example, people who smoke cigarettes and then their excuse for smoking the next one is, well, I can quit anytime, and then they pick it up again, right? They're not aware of their relation to something in which they've built a habit towards using, right? People have a terrible time fully seeing themselves in comparison to in the right magnitude or proportions to what it is about them that they rely on, until those things are taken away from them, right? You don't know what you've got till it's gone. It could be another formulation of how it is people are numb to extensions of themselves in the environment. Now, the popular interpretation of Narcissus has it that he fell in love with his own image and then spurned lovers. But the opposite is really true. He spurned lovers. He didn't involve himself in the world and then became victim to falling in love with his image. That's a completely different story. Right? It's not that he fell in love with his image and then his self-absorption numbed him to the world. It's that he was never alive to the world, and that made him susceptible to the capture of it, right? You want to look at this as a matter of right upbringing, of what it takes to raise a child into someone who would be resilient against becoming a servo mechanism of whatever, speaks their language back to them. Then it means them having an attachment and grounding in their world to begin with, and so that they have they can be resilient against the temptations of easy immediate gratification from whoever's offering it to them. So that's sort of how I would like to look at, right, children as the product of the present. I'll get autobiographical here just because it's at hand for me. I was learning computers. We had like old computers in my house. So even though it was the 90s and everyone else was using Windows 95 or Windows 98, I was playing around in DOS, downloading all these apps or applications, for DOS and Windows 3.1 and, and all this stuff. Computers were still very difficult as I learned them. But that wasn't the childhood that other kids had, where they just, right, they could just, have something up to date to go play Quake on, right? Or they were on the internet already, where I was booking time at the library to go have, an hour or two, every couple days, right, out of the house, so to speak. So I had a different relationship to my environment than lots of other people who are my age. They were more, in my formulation, engaged in the cyberspace of it. And here I was actually trying to fix my computer because I broke it and I had to take it apart and I had to figure out what was wrong, because otherwise I'd be in shit because I broke the computer, right? there's a very much a different mindset towards your involvement in the media of your immediate day, and how much it grounds you in and gives you resilience against the easy affordances of contemporary consumer society. And so that's sort of how I would stratiate the depth of our mediated world today, is down the computer stack. So all that goes to say is that is that narcissism is falling in love with the image in the content that media is showing you, and McLuhan is prescribing that one way to resist that is to be aware of the medium itself.
Yeah, Clinton, beautiful. And you brought up a thing that I'm really happy because it's a basic, and it is Narcissus saw his reflection in water, and that is nature. We didn't invent water as a reflective tool, but we invented the mirror. So we said, hey, water does this, and we can invent something that does this and put it on our wall so we can use mirrors. And one of my friends said years ago, he says, one of the worst things humans ever invented was the mirror. And it's interesting because we when we study McLuhan, we realize that every invention has services and disservices. And if you make a value judgment, you're just missing out on how it shapes our behavior. But in your lonely teenage room, you can go, I love mirrors, or I hate mirrors, or you go, I love Facebook, or I hate Facebook. But that's a value judgment, and suspended judgment allows you to see the big picture. So
Yes.
I think we might be hardwired to have opinion or point of view, but in the long run, if you're with one or more people, if you can practice suspended judgment, you're probably going to be getting the big picture better. So this whole thing is, we invented the mirror because we saw it in nature. So we see a tool, a stick, and then we go, well, I can use my hand to do that, but this stick is efficient and extends my humanness. But the flip is, I heard someone in the McLuhan world said, technology is the most human thing. Then inventing extensions of our body is the most human thing. How do you sort of navigate through what I just said about that sort of couple ideas?
Yes. So there's two things that the mirror obsolesced. One of them is reflections in the water, and
Yeah,
the other is the only other way that we could gain reflections of ourselves, and that's interface with another human being. We see
yeah,
ourselves in how other people respond to us socially. And the medium for that is, of course, the spoken word, or, articulation and gesticulation, I used to say, but that's a very clumsy formulation,
yeah,
right? So I learn who I am by talking to you. You pull me
yeah,
out of me, and I pull you out of you, and so I get a reflection of myself against you, and you're one mirror, and someone else I'm talking to gives me a different version of myself, right? So these are the
yeah,
two things that the mirror obsolesced. Um, we can close about our immediately mechanically reflected image in the pool of water or in a mirror, more clearly. Um, Now the thing is, as extensions of ourselves and as technology being very human, it sort of makes me think of like a David Cronenberg film, right? And Videodrome is obvious, but all these things where technology has this strange pulsating, viscerally biological sort of sense, right? Like to what extent is our mechanical environment this cold, abstract, mathematical, inhuman, unfeeling thing, and how much of a of the world are we sort of enwombed in this pulsating, living, thriving sort of extension of humanity, where everything around you was born from the brain of its inventor or its creator to then spawn and surround you and become sort of this layer of sediment of the ground of our extended reality, right? And that is precisely, I think, the importance of Siegfried Giedion's anonymous history for inspiring Marshall McLuhan, because Siegfried Giedion was a Swiss art historian who wrote Space, Time, and Architecture in 1942. It was released, I believe. And he took all the techniques of art criticism into analyzing architecture and environments. And then 10 years later, he released Mechanization Takes Command, where he was looking at just machines and levers and pulleys and bathrooms and indoor plumbing and office chairs and all sorts of, just all of our technological media. He was examining them as though they were pieces of art, like a painting or a poem. That's Siegfried Giedion's massive innovation, which blew McLuhan's mind, was the idea that by looking at all of our regular objects as though, from the anonymous history of the person whose name is printed on this patent that's stored away in a filing cabinet somewhere in some city that you're never going to see, right? Like the artist, right? Every cup and every running shoe doesn't have the name of the person who had to sit there and get paid pennies to cobble it together, carved in it, so you know who to give credit to for having made it for you. But everything does come at some end of this assembly line out of the imagination of a person, and that's what the core of media studies. That's one essential dimension of media studies, is rehumanizing our abstract mechanical world by looking back to the humans from which it was born and onto which the world, right, they wrought it onto us, right? So that's why I'm so big into looking at the history of computers and what was going on at Xerox PARC in the 70s, not just for history because I'm a computer nerd, but for the sake of rehumanizing and understanding and putting into human scale proportions, separating the human from their extension, right?
Yeah.
Inventors are just mere people, just like you and I are mere people. So if you want to excavate the human scale and the mere human from our massive sense extensions, which tend to, back in Mechanical Bride, McLuhan was saying, people are blown into like Superman like proportions when they're titans of industry and buildings are built or demolished on their say, right? They blow themselves up into massive scale because of the weight of their human importance. Look at what I can do, right? I'm Ozymandias, bow towards me, right? Blah 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 blah, right? I think that's what part of what McLuhan was trying to rectify was let's excavate the mere piddly human out of their extension, right? By seeing the origins of all this.
Yeah, that was good. He really reminded me of Charles and Ray Eames, who did get a little right here in Venice for 40 years. They invented the chairs you sit at in airports, and they made that film called Powers of 10. And they were half experimental artists and half utilitarian inventors of practical stuff we use, chairs, and how we sit in a chair and how does it fit our need. So let's go into this thing called there's two that really get me: sense ratio shifting and effects precede causes. But I have to ask you first, what did McLuhan mean by the drama of cognition? Like, did humans invent thinking, or is it in us innately? And I always go, if you invent thinking, you bet there's going to be drama.
Oh goodness. Well, I think the context the most comes up in is the retracing of the drama of cognition as performed by the artist who performs the inductive method as codified by Edgar Allan Poe in his essay on composition.
Yeah.
And Edgar Allan Poe is credited by McLuhan for having invented the detective whodunit mystery genre. And I swear to God, whenever my roommate's watching TV downstairs, she's watching one more, derivative mystery whodunit hour long. Oh, we're on the case. All right, the investigators going around asking. Right, that's all. People love mystery dramas, right? And they're a story told backwards, where you find out the beginning of it at the end. And then everything you had just watched, which was a confusing tangle of facts, is finally pulled into this, very cathartic, like, oh, that explains everything, right? And the only way to tell a story backwards is to retrace the drama of cognition, right? It means
and that
the artist
swoops you in. Yeah, that's what swoops you in. Then the user gets more involved because they go, I think I know what's going to happen. They're not just told. It becomes a two-way deal.
Yeah, it's a cool medium, slowly heating up the genre of a mystery fiction. And the only way an artist can produce that is by having the words or the means or the structure artistically as a craft that they hone. Because they're an artist, they have talent. art and artist Ernest Becker, deriving lots from Otto Rank. In his book The Denial of Death, he states that the difference between an artist and a neurotic is talent. Right? The neurotic in this case is someone who can see what's going on, but maybe they have a Cassandra complex. They can't tell anyone. They can't express it. They're just all bottled up. If you want to use the Freudian, right? They're all bottled up and they're under pressure, but they have no release into an artistic medium where they extend themselves cathartically into that thing. They can just point to. Look, you want to understand me? Just look at my art. I'm moving on to something else now. The art's done. I'm done. Right? Moving on with my life. Right? And you need talent to do that. You need to actually be able to produce art. You have to have honed your craft and worked at building up the ability to express yourself, to master this movie set you're talking about. You had to start with the pixel camera and eventually develop and grow into someone who capable of managing an entire film set, right? So an artist is someone who is able to, using their art, show you the steps that everyone can do instantly. The drama of cognition takes place in milliseconds, right? You see something, I know what's going on. Great. How do you, as an artist, now spend 6 months directing a film that meticulously takes by part and then reconstitutes, putting together the feeling that everyone has every single day as an artist, recognizing things, recognizing the world. Right? They're recognizing the world. I see what's going on because when I was a child, I saw something just like that. Now I see it again. I'm recognizing that thing, right? Our very ability to perceive the world is the drama of cognition. And the artist's art is effective because they have the capacity to instantiate in art the drama of recognition and mediate it to other people.
Yeah, really well put. That was good. And then what I sent you, my friend Jay was bringing up the McLuhan difference between anecdote and anesthetic. Did you catch that? What McLuhan was trying to say?
Interesting.
The difference. Yeah, and then Cameron commented on it too. That Cameron says we move past these environments that are created, and we use the environments as props. So I think what you just said really summarized that. That you see this stuff, then you use it as a prop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you regurgitate it, like mosaic writing McLuhan would do, or the idea of collage. Mm-hmm. So, Clint, what do you think Marshall meant by sense ratio shifting and effects precede causes? Let's start with effects precede causes, because that one really gets people. They like, no, it's the other way around. And I goes, mainly what Marshall was talking about was causality. And here's what I'm going to tell you, and you tell me where I'm haywire or where I might not. I think causality studies was so prominent in McLuhan because you can't really say that anything causes anything. If someone commits suicide and they leave a note and go, I committed suicide because of this, that doesn't mean that's the reason. That's just one part of what the person was trying to articulate. So we can't really say what causes what, but we want to think we can, and some are probably more valid than others. So what is effects precede causes mean? In the big picture of causality. Because if you start using those terms Eric uses and Marshall, it really throws me off. The different types of causality. I think people get lost in those. Efficient causality in those. So anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, that is where I was going to take this Aristotle's 4 causes, but I'll start with something that
fine, but if you put it in layperson's terms.
Sure. Well, I can best do that by recalling what Andrew McLuhan just said recently. He's running this understanding media intensive course right now. He's only 2 weeks into it. It's like a 12-part course where he's going through understanding media by Marshall McLuhan exhaustively. And he just spent the last Saturday in his course talking about the an essay, The Yegg, Marshall McLuhan's Theory of Communication by Eric McLuhan. And all that boils down to is that people always start with a theory or a concept. people have lots of concepts in their head. For 500 years, we've been reading so many books. Everyone's got a whole bunch of concepts in their head. And so they think they know the cause first. And then they go out when they're looking at the world and they try to think, okay, look at, like, how did these effects come from what I already know the cause is? So they lack what we were calling before, this childhood forgetting to actually go and try and work backwards from the effects to determine the cause. They already know what the like, what does human evolution say about why such and such a people behave this way, right? That's behavioral or evolutionary psychology, right? I already know it's because of something to do with evolutionary biology, and that this is why that's caused. Let's start from that premise, right? It's backwards because it's efficient causality. It's this very linear, this causes this, the past creates the present, creates the future, right? Which makes sense in a small mechanical way. It's the way most things work in our general mechanical world. The first domino hits the second domino, hits the third domino. But once we factor in human psychology and the fact that most of what people are doing is based on what they think is going on and what's not really going on, that's the importance of understanding human subjectivities and not making value judgments about, like, most people are working the world wrong anyway. They're using devices based on how the devices were intended to fool them, not based on what the devices are. People are working according to rules of business or rules of protocol and decorum that don't make sense for the situation at hand, right? Everyone's working the machinery around them wrong anyway. And so much of the reasons we do things are based on the vast ignorance of what's actually going on, because everyone's co-creating this hallucination of what's really going on. That what we call effects and what we call causes, or what we observe as effects and what we observe as causes, are totally displaced in time and space. The way things get invented is they become so obvious that eventually someone had to invent them way late to the game when they should have been invented 50 years ago, right? And all the puzzle pieces have to fall into place subliminally. So it's so obvious that some dumb moron out there go, hey, why don't we just do this? And he's elevated the statue of genius for having invented this thing. But it's only because he could already see the effects that this guy made more efficient already happening all around him, and a better cause to create these effects popped into his imagination, and he or she actually invented them, right? So the effects of things are already happening by the time a cause finally pops into existence. Artists had already been using pointillism to create art out of tiny dots before someone's like, hey, how about we create images out of tiny dots? And they just created a different medium to do that, television, right? But the effects had already been there and already well established in the artistic domain of painting, right? That's what it means. And so when you get to Aristotle, this linear step by step is called the efficient cause, and it's the most boring. And what's really interesting is the formal cause, because it's like the total formal thing that no one can see the whole of, that we're only ever groping. The proverbial elephant. There's three blind gurus standing around an elephant, feeling a different part of it, and one's grabbing the tusk and going, elephants are really hard and tough, and the other one's right. They're all, at least they're trying to understand the elephant in the room, because no one else is even looking at the elephant in the room, right? They're all trying to ignore it, right? So that's how that all sort of comes together.
That was really good. Let me clarify one thing with you, if you could. So efficient causality is limited. Formal causality is the big picture.
Yeah. Formal causality is the gestalt. It's
the gestalt. What is the third and fourth of Aristotle's four causalities? Did he actually say efficient and formal?
Those are the translations. Yes. You can get all this in Eric McLuhan's essay on formal causality.
Right. But what are the material? What's material mean?
Plain boring. What's something made of? Porcelain, coffee mug.
What it's made of? Plain,
if porcelain
boring.
wasn't porcelain, there'd be no cause for this mug to be made out of porcelain, right?
That's the form, not the content.
Material is not, no, material is the raw material. Which,
Raw material. Okay.
yeah, the basic properties of that material is what allows the thing to be the thing, because you made it out of those materials to make the thing be the thing.
Right. And then what's the fourth one? Efficient, formal, material, and
Final cause.
what is that?
That's the always in the future coming intentional end of what it is, right? This thing is caused by the ends. I mean, doing these means for this vague final intentional end, which might be intrinsic to the things. These things are inevitably going to be come together to become this, or right. It's the vague culmination of the potential of as I understand it, I'm no philosopher, but my scattered readings have said that what Aristotle did is he imbued matter with potential, which is as real
Yeah.
as its actual being here and now. Things have this potential, which is like this virtual property. This seed has the potential to be a tree, right?
Yeah.
The tree is the final cause of planting the seed, right? And it's this property things have now to fulfill this future thing. And it's all vague and imaginary and exists within the human subjective perception of things. It's not a physical property of matter like material cause is, right?
Yeah. So you do the coffee cup really well. You said material is the porcelain. What is for the coffee cup? What's the efficient, the formal, and the final?
Well, so I'm sure this coffee cup wasn't handcrafted by a Tahitian maid. So let's see here. Corel coordinates made in China. So the efficient cause was the market forces that dictated it was profitable to go build a stamp out porcelain coffee mug factory somewhere in China. Right, the processes of creating and refining and shaping porcelain, whatever those would be. I haven't watched that episode of How It's Made yet. A
Yeah.
very boring step-by-step process, right?
The factory process. Okay, what's the formal cause?
Well, there's actually, I guess I sort of leaked into the formal cause when I said the market forces that dictated that it was profitable to produce porcelain mugs in China and then ship them across the world for me to buy at, wherever the heck this got purchased, right?
Right.
The formal cause would be the fact that gravity allows the empty space in such a vessel shaped thus to suspend liquids, and we are biological animals that have a constant reoccurring need to have liquids at hand to which to consume to keep our guts going. The total entire condition which made this cup is the rituals by which we consume coffee in the morning, because right, blah 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 blah, right, we have hands such and such, the fingers, every single, the gestalt, the total surrounding totality of everything,
Yeah.
that makes this cup the perfect fit to existing right here in time and space in my hand, insofar as the human and the material reasons, the total formal cause.
And then what's the final?
The final cause is me getting my fix for coffee this morning.
Getting caffeine so we can do this. Well, we've gone about 90. Can you go another 10 or 20, or are you done?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay. So I really appreciate this. You covered a lot. And in that last one, you did touch on what it's funny because Wikipedia will call Marshall a light technological determinist. And I would say, well, no, he's not really a technological determinist, but he is somewhat one, but he employs Menippean satire in doing it. So then you touched on biological determinism and historical determinism. Like, I would say, try to answer this question in that regard. The telegraph caused the Civil War. The radio caused World War I and II. What did the electric guitar cause?
Does it have to be a war?
No, that's
The war.
good. You're answering a question with a question. Yeah. But anyways, I have this huge survey. It's really fun that I did years ago. And it's that sort of thing that here's the cliche line that you can address. Our inventions shape us, not what we use them for. Now, that's sort of saying technological determinism, that, you know, it doesn't matter what's on TV, it's that you're watching TV. But what I learned from my studies with Robert Dobbs was that no, McLuhan was saying both the content and the form of television are both important, but generally people are more caught up in the content. So I'm going to emphasize the form so you'll wake up to a little, pay attention to the form.
Right. Let's stick with the guitar. What does the guitar
Okay.
cause?
Yeah.
The guitar affords people the ability to emote, to scream, to cry, to shriek, guitars gently weep. Electric
Yeah.
guitars gently weep,
Yeah.
and they do so without words. It's music, right? There's no content in music,
Yeah.
except so if I don't want to say anything indelicately, but musical performance can give people a form of expression which is nevertheless absent semantic. It's wholly involved, but everyone gets to project their own idea of what the guitar is crying about, right?
Yeah.
It's an easy short circuit form of communion, and there's this reoccurring theme that reoccurs since electricity has enabled music to become, right, to evolve. It provides this sense of togetherness, and everyone in the audience is all swaying together, and the music brings us together. And then in the 90s, these rave kids are doing MDMA, and they're all in the rave scene dancing this music all together as one, right? This cathartic spirit of it all, which nevertheless, once the molly wears off and you're standing around with a bunch of strangers and you don't know what to talk about, shit's gonna break loose, right?
What's a molly?
Who made you the in
What
charge of this?
what is a molly again? What drug is a molly?
MDMA. It's a drug.
MDMA is a molly. That's good. I like that. Okay.
Ecstasy. Let's say.
Ecstasy.
So.
Oh, okay. Ecstasy, yeah.
So what I'm getting at is that this is a way that the environments can bring us together, but also it brings us together in a way which is stronger and more potent than, say, the spoken word brought people together when there was merely the spoken word, right? This is not to say people weren't using drums and weren't generating sounds and rhythms and dancing together in dithyrambic forms, but for all of history. But the magnitude and the proportions of how much of music is now mediated, right, and how vague song lyrics speak to everyone differently, the way that brings people together in this foreshortened sort of way, which stops short of actual communion, is I think an important facet of what electronic media and what electric guitar do. I hope that answers one part of your question. I'm trying to remember the rest of it.
It was good, because you might be able to tap in the sort of final subject we'll cover, but there were two things. Walter Pater said a great one. He says, all art aspires to the condition of music. Like, music is so cool that, painting, literature, essays, history, anthropology, they all wish they could be as cool as music, because music is like, it's just got something special going. So it's a funny thing. But I did want to tell you a joke, because Marshall was so fond of jokes, that this childhood forgetting that you brought up, that I often say that the kid gets to the age where they realize that their parents have a job, that they go to a job and they have a profession. So the kid asks his dad, so what do you do? And the dad goes, well, I'm an art teacher. I teach people how to draw. And the kid goes, you mean they forgot? That is amazing, because kids think you don't have to learn how to draw. You mean you have to be taught how to draw? Everybody knows how to draw. You just take a pencil and scribble, So it's a great thing. It covers a lot. It's sort of like the other McLuhan joke where the kid gets in the airplane and he goes, "Daddy, when do we get smaller?" You know, because the perspective is he's watched airplanes fly away and they get smaller. So, Clinton, this has been highly enlightening. I appreciate it. I wish we could do this more often, and hopefully we will. But Marshall said this thing. He said the contemporary consciousness of the unconscious. So that alone is something to tackle, because I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between conscious and consciousness. But it's more so in a question that Marshall asked. So you can approach discussion on this however you may. But here's the question Marshall asked. He didn't tell us how to think. He just said, here's another question. Like he's constantly saying, let's invent new metaphors. Let's invent new questions. And his question was, how about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness? So it's really boiling down to what's the difference between conscious and consciousness, because technologies, we know what they are. They're things that humans invent. Art is this other thing. You know, maybe it's what we do with technologies or whatever. But there's definitely a difference between technologies and art, somewhat. Like technologies are more tools. Art might be what inspires us to use the tools, the muse or whatever. So you can discuss that too. But basically, again, the question is, Marshall asked, how about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness?
All right. So when you use a tool, you are first you're conscious of it because you're learning it, and then you get good at it and it becomes an unconscious gesture. But tools are instrumentalized, which means there's something salient right now that you're consciously working on. It's salient to you. You're paying attention to it. You're not paying attention to other stuff, right? And if you want to think of what you pay attention to as your consciousness moving about, and what is drawing your physical body to do things in response to achieve what it is is salient to you, right? That's your consciousness. And so tools are our consciousness extended, because when we are trying to do a thing in an embodied sense or in an extended body sense or in an electric disembodied sense, right? Like let's say I am conscious of being the little arrow on my screen that's about to so-called click a so-called button in this cyberspace, right? This thing is my conscious right now at the moment. But art exists constantly to be contemplated. It doesn't exist in the moment of time just that you're paying attention to it. It's the entire interface is art, creating this cyberspace world of buttons and windows and websites and links and stuff that's always right there for me to interact with. It's the unconsciousness. Well, it was the consciousness of the artist who made it, and then for me it becomes environment and something that's unconscious to me. I mean, so much like if everything that we create is what is the product of an artisan, the culmination of the mastery of an art, an artisanal, artifact of our artificial second nature environmental world, well, we are mostly unconscious of it. And then technology is a thing is a technology when we're using it. So that's the consciousness. So that's the conscious doing its thing moment by moment by moment, whatever's salient to you. Right now, I'm conscious of this, but you're not conscious that the hammer is an extension of you. So it's your unconscious doing things, because, when you once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. It means that you are an unconscious bicyclist moving about through the unconsciousness of a world where streets are always parallel and destinations are always 6 incremental blocks ahead of you in this artistically constructed cityscape, right? But you don't pay attention to that. All you care about is getting to the bakery on time or whatever, right? The bike is your unconscious means to traverse your unconsciousness, and reality is a giant hallucination, and whatever you think is going on in the relations between you as a dualistically embodied spirit possessing a body is not what's really going on, because you're just working the surface the whole time. That's how I would interpret that.
That was good. It reminded me of the words magic carpet ride.
Yeah, we're all on a magic carpet ride, man.
When I ride my bike, I am doing my best thinking and feeling and intuition, and I'm on a magic carpet ride. But boy, I have to be very attentive because it is wild out there on the streets the way people drive.
Yeah.
You know. So, how about closing out? Put you really on the spot. You saw the feature film called The Social Dilemma.
Yes.
You saw the whole film. And I know did you release your essay on it already, or you're going to?
I'm going to. It's getting pretty big.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But I would just, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you a little about it, and then you react to that, and then we'll close out. Is that okay?
Please do.
Okay. So, this is agenda filmmaking. I've studied documentaries for 50 years, and he made 2 films on climate change, and then he decided to make this one, and he got some pretty good spokespeople I think that Jaron Lanier is one of their rare people, and I've talked directly to Jaron about McLuhan and Finnegan's Wake in a one-on-one, and he is one that said, hey, we invented something and we should pay attention to how it's shaping our behavior. And he's one of the few that have said that, whereas most of them just say, hey, we've invented something and it's super cool and let's use this and it's changing the world. Like the one guy goes, I felt like what I invented was going to make the world love each other more, And so then he makes this film, and I think Tristan Harris is the main spokesperson behind the film. Yeah. So I tell people, just go online and watch Tristan and the director talk to, PBS for 15 minutes, and you'll get a lot of the essence of the film. And there's complaints about the film. They don't like the docudrama stuff or whatever. And it's raised a lot of issues. But in essence, in my opinion, it's bringing an awareness, even though it's agenda ridden, it's bringing awareness to something people aren't so aware of. They probably figure they're being shaped by these tools, but they like how they're being shaped by them, and they try their best, I won't have a screen on for an hour, or, I'll put my phone on mute and I'll go take a walk or whatever. My biggest thing is when people walk their dogs or their children in buggies, all they do is take the time to catch up on their cell phone. And I'm like, the kid and the dog go, oh, this isn't about stopping and smelling flowers or being with me. It's about you staring at your cell phone. And they don't, you're ruining your kid by doing your cell phone on a walk. But that's not ruin, it's changing. So just overall, what do you want to say about the social dilemma? What could you say in a couple ideas or thoughts on it, the film?
So, I'll say a few things. First and foremost, spoilers. Yeah. The film ends, it's got this fictionalized subplot, B plot of this typical family whose life is, whose domestic bliss is torn asunder by these phones, which capture the imagination of the susceptible family members. The point being, there's this young man who we see in like the sort of like Star Trek style holodecks Matrix analogy being worked over by these 3 algorithms all wearing black clothes who are all trying to gamify his life and get him hooked on the phone more and trying to manipulate him into buying things and make money selling his eyeballs to advertisers. And at the end of the film, in the optimistic, what can we do about this phase? The little hologram of our captive subject who is been fully resolved into the simulation, sort of breaks his chains and steps down from the platform, and his feet lowers to the ground. He takes charge of his digital life, and then the algorithms who are all wearing black sort of res out and get replaced by one wearing white. And now there's a white algorithm, a white closed, like a white hat hacker versus a black hat hacker analogy, or a white wizard, black wizard sort of dichotomy going on there. And this all wearing white algorithm says, you know, like, oh, how can I help you? How can I serve you? Right. And he represents like, oh, if only the algorithms worked for good and not for evil, right? Is sort of was that, you know, mythical symbolic move there, which I mean, listen, you have to end the movie somehow, and if you don't have any ideas, then you tack on the you know, the Lord of the Rings analogy, and all's well and good. But yeah. So I'd like for my essay in broad strokes, I'm focusing more about how, you know, people have been sort of in the content of media been resolving into this dream space represented by the Matrix, this whole Gnostic analogy, which McLuhan was heavy into studying Gnostic literature as a means of understanding how the secular world works in relation to his particular deep dive into the Western trivium and logos and you know, the Western tradition as he understood it while he was working on his doctoral thesis, the Nash essay. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned Jaron Lanier. He's got a book out there called "You Are Not a Gadget." I think he wrote it about 10 years ago. Where he uses the MIDI music protocol as an example of how, you know, hey, we just started in the 80s, like, you know, being able to make music on computers, and we were trying to move from analog synthesis into like digital representations of music. So we made a digital version of sheet music, and it's like, okay, here's how we'll represent the notes, and here's how we'll play, you know, like 12 tracks of, you know, simultaneous polyphonic representations of a bank of 128 instruments called a general MIDI, right? So they invented MIDI, and then they watched MIDI destroy pop music for 20 years because all this music was made with MIDI, and the disservices of sitting there and typing out your music score on a computer and having the computer play your music became readily apparent compared to all the things that are lost from a live performance by live musicians expressing themselves. You know, it's not right. What MIDI affords is a highly structured, mechanical, you know, to his musical ear form of expression, which falls far short of the total capacity of music. And MIDI was a horrible idea in retrospect, because now people, you know, are so cemented in these concepts, as McLuhan would say, like MIDI has become the ground of music composition for people who learn how to sit on the computer and make beats all day. That like music, like electronic composition techniques have redefined music for a couple generations of performers now. So just dick around inventing this way of using crappy old 80s computers to make music has become cemented as the ground of being. And he writes, 150 years from now, we can imagine some you know, astronaut sitting on a spaceship on an interplanetary mission playing some cheesy crappy MIDI song over her ship's computer, because culture still hasn't gotten back to rectifying the mistake we made when we foreshortened music to this, you know, this these few protocols. Yeah, no, I think Jaron Lanier's inclusion there, contrariwise Jonathan Haidt, is a very interesting person to have in that documentary as well. I'll go into all this in the future, but yeah, it's very auspicious to recognize people second guessing. Jaron Lanier has been not second guessing, looking back and trying to think critically and constructively and accept, you know, proper analysis of the situation as it has been, and raise awareness about what constitutes our modern world, that such that people can come around addressing the problem, right? So in that regard, I applaud the social dilemma and the work of everyone doing it towards illuminating the problems. But yeah, it's ultimately the timeline horizon of it is extremely young and naive to think that this is a problem 15 years in the making, right? I would say this is a problem, you know, centuries in the making, but that's what makes me a crazy McLuhan scholar.
but whenever I see what's the machine that the drum machine? What is it called? Drum machine? The first machine that was a drum that
I'm
made
not sure what the first
drum.
one is, but the 808 got really popular. If you think of like Chris
But I mean,
Berg's,
what was it called? It was called but it was. I saw a bumper sticker. I can't think of the name. It's called a drum machine or a drum box, or what was the first electronic?
a drum machine.
Drum
You just like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The bumper sticker said drum machines. Oh God, now I can't even think what the bumper sticker said, but it just basically said drum machines have no. Oh, here it is. It says drum machines have no soul. And so I went up to this guy who invented the bumper sticker, and I was saying, well, I think what you're saying is that drum machines, according to your aesthetic, are sometimes misused and they have no soul. And I was like, that's like saying chairs have no soul. So anything humans invent has services and disservices. And there's services to a drum machine and there are disservices to it. And he goes, that's too long to put on a bumper sticker. So, I mean, in essence, when you said, MIDI ruined music for 20 years, you were just saying, according to your aesthetic, it ruined music, but in the long run, it had services and it has disservices. I mean, do you sort of agree with that? Yeah,
I do, and you might then spin it into some sort of power structure analysis where you say who's getting service and who's getting the disservice or something like
right.
this. But
Yeah.
back to the bumper sticker, actually, I'd like to note an excellent example of effects preceding causes, as might be illuminated by the joke. How did the disco era die out?
How?
Somebody killed the drummer.
Yeah, somebody killed the drummer because that's George Clinton says there's a fine line between disco and funk. And it's so true because the drum beats are really close and there is good disco, but a lot of it was counterculturally correctness was you're supposed to say, I hate disco, and then it comes back around. And there's a whole movie I saw on how disco was this political thing and that, you take the first great disco beat, it was Soul Makossa, which was an African song, which amazing funk song, but it got known in America through Michael Jackson using it in his songs. And so it's like, how did it cross over? But that was really good. And Clinton, I really want to thank you because you did follow through on this mission, was to put this into lay person's terms so that, people can sort of understand this and we don't talk in the highbrow like Bob said years ago, well, he's a failed McLuhanite. And I loved that term because it was like Hugh Kenner, Alan Toffler, and he just listed all the failed McLuhanites, all these people who sat at McLuhan's feet, learned everything they know, made lots of money, but they were failed. And one friend says, well, that sounds sort of elitist. So he says, well, Bob, how could we word it otherwise? He goes, non-Finneganese McLuhanites, which was really interesting because so many of the media ecology folks are brilliant and great, but they're non-Finneganese McLuhanites. So it's a debatable subject as well, but I feel that you have really captured it and not talked in the highbrow academic, just personal lexicon of McLuhan terms, and then people just go, I don't know what you're talking about. So you made it.
My best education was on the internet, and what the internet is a constant conversation in web forums of strangers who you don't even know who it is, how old they are, what they look like, gender, sex, race, and where they are. It's just a little avatar, and you're involved in deep conversations, back and forth, and long-standing, right? And everyone's just explaining stuff to one another. That's what it is, right? How to wield language in conversational text. I don't think conversational text existed beyond kids passing each other's notes in class before the internet, right? But then turning that into face-to-face conversation, that's the real leap.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for saying so.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you the question. We'll just leave it. You don't have to answer it. Is did humans invent eye contact? Because that's what we really operate as an eye contact and verbal exchange. But my friend taught me that term yesterday. We started with life pro tip. It's Reddit. And he says the cool thing is that people purposely put comments on the life pro tips inaccurately so that they will start a discussion, or they'll put up a life pro tip not correct so that the discussion gets the ball rolling.
That's
So
an old
whatever
adage. That's an old adage on Slashdot for getting advice on how to fix your computer. Is don't ask the question, hey, what's wrong with my computer? It does this. Is go post the wrong answer on how to fix it. Hey, everyone, if your computer's doing this, just make up some garbage, and then everyone will rush to correct you by giving you, no, that's all wrong.
That is great. That's a really cool thing. It's an old adage.
Yeah.
Okay, Clinton, thank you once again. And hopefully we'll meet up again, and this will be on YouTube for till the end of time.
Here's hoping. Great talking to you, Gerry.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.